Hello and welcome to another edition of Snakes Territory. I'm Jesse Friedman. That's Jack Sommers from Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. And Jack, we are here with a post-game show after a pretty wild back and forth affair in Queens. The Diamondbacks ultimately pull this one out by a final score of 4-3. Jack, they tacked on 2 runs to a 2-1 lead in the top of the ninth. Things were looking pretty good. And then things got a little shaky in the bottom of the ninth of this game, but the Diamondbacks ultimately come away with a win.
I was under advisement that it's impossible for the D-backs to win at Citi Field. They came in 4-18 since 2018, so nice of them to grab one today.
And this was the second time this season that the Mets have lost a baseball game at home. So the Diamondbacks accomplished something in that sense that has been very difficult to do across the entire league. The Mets have played really, really well to start this 2025 season. But Jack, I guess the story in this game, we kind of have to start right there at the end. Geraldo Perdomo, we have here on the headline, is kind of the lead character. But this game really almost got out of hand for the Diamondbacks in the ninth inning. Justin Martinez came on with a 4-1 lead. He allowed a home run to Tyrone Taylor. He walked both Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. His velocity was down significantly, continuing a recent trend. And then Ryan Thompson had to come in and clean up the mess, and he was just barely able to do that.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Mr. Martinez in just a moment, but kudos to Perdomo. I mean, he picked up 3 RBIs, 2 on a huge pinch hit, base hit, and he had a sac fly RBI, and he now leads the Diamondbacks with 24 RBIs. That's 1 ahead of Corbin Carroll, who has 23. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, Geraldo Perdomo is now on pace for 130 RBI this season, if I'm not mistaken. So I know you guys recently had an article on your site with having fun with all of the on-pace numbers, which is kind of a crazy thing to do at this time of year, but it still could be kind of interesting. But yeah, Justin Martinez, Jack, 95.5 miles an hour was his average sinker velocity. Obviously, there's been some recent questions about his health. After his most recent outing, the Diamondbacks came back and have not sounded very concerned about him in recent days, even though his velocity was down so significantly. And at this point, Jack, with another game in the books where he was 95 with his sinker down about 5 miles an hour, you have to wonder if their tone is going to change on that front.
It has to. I mean, they tried to give it the old 1-2 college try. They mitigated it a little bit over the last 24 hours. I believe you have a quote there from Assistant General Manager Mike Fitzgerald and some things that he said to Nick Picoro. Torrey seemed to kind of walk back a little bit. When we spoke to him on Sunday, he expressed a great deal of concern. He even used the word alarm. And as he should have, it's just not normal for anybody to lose 4 to 5 miles per hour of velocity from one outing to the next. I don't care who it is or what the reason is. It's just not normal. It's not right.
Brandon Buckingham in the chat said, Torrey and company, please put J Mart on IL for his own health. Yeah, I mean, there is an element of the Diamondbacks having a young pitcher that is going to be a part of this bullpen for a long time, given the contract that they just signed with him. And you want to make sure that you're taking good care of that player, right? And Justin Martinez is a really important part of this team in the long run. And it is unfortunate for the Diamondbacks, though, right? I mean, AJ Puk, we're going to talk about him more later in the show. It sounds like he's going to avoid surgery, but it's still pretty unclear when you're going to see him pitching in a game. And the Diamondbacks, frankly, Jack, for the last 2 weeks or so, have not had AJ Puk, and they haven't really had Justin Martinez either, because he just hasn't been the same guy here over those last couple of weeks.
And it showed. I mean, without those two guys, either being there or pitching effectively, their bullpen has a near 7 ERA, starting from the 18th. So that clearly is a major problem for the team going forward. not sure how they're going to have to fix it, whether or not they'll designate Shelby Miller or Kevin Ginkel as a closer and just try to line out the roles. I doubt it. They'll probably hit us with the same matchup situation, which right now I can kind of understand. But, I hope that they do figure it out really quickly and just go to roles and give somebody a shot at it. And, if a guy saves 8 of 10, you're going to have to take 80% save rate and go from there. They can't keep doing what they're doing right now. J Mart's not well. He just isn't. He doesn't look right, spraying the ball all over the place. He's lost over 5 miles an hour. I'm sure at this point they're going to do something. They got to send him for an MRI. They got to deactivate him for a little while.
It was 14 pitches in this game for him, and just 4 of them were in the zone. And yeah, as you said, he really was just kind of spraying the ball all over the place. So that's a really big, despite the win, despite the fact that the Diamondbacks did pull off a big win in Queens tonight, that's a pretty big storyline that kind of overshadows this entire game. Maybe Ryan Helsley's gonna come over and save the day, Jack. You think that's gonna happen anytime soon?
Well, that's another topic. We were going to get to it last show, and we didn't quite get there. Where I've been looking a little bit more at potential cost. Where we started our research actually on this is what has been the cost given up for relievers with 2 months plus of control or 3 months of control versus 1+ years of control that are high leverage pitchers, either high leverage 8th inning setup guys or closers. And the costs are not light. For example, Tanner Scott last year, he got a couple of top 10 pitching prospects off the Padres, so I don't know if that's exactly what the cost would be for the Diamondbacks, but let's find out first if they're actually going to be buyers at the deadline, and then we'll worry about that.
Yeah, and if the Cardinals are going to be sellers, and even if they are going to be sellers, are they going to be sellers in April, or I guess we're basically into May now? Probably not. We'll talk more about that on a later episode. But I do want to circle around to Geraldo Perdomo, Jack, who came through with the biggest hit for the Diamondbacks in this game. Runners at second and third, 2 outs in the 7th inning. Diamondbacks still down 1-0 at the time. And Perdomo comes off the bench, faces Ryan Stanek, a guy who's out there throwing 100 miles an hour. And you could tell he was a little late on the first fastball that he tried to swing at. And then he was able to time it up well enough. And he hit a little bleeder to the opposite field, a 2-run single that turned a 1-0 deficit into a 2-1 lead. And then Perdomo came back around his next time up and hit a sac fly that turned, at that point, a 3-1 lead into a 4-1 lead. And the Diamondbacks needed all of those runs in order to ultimately come away with a win. So just another big day for Geraldo Perdomo, Jack, and ironically on the first game of the season where he was not in the starting lineup.
I just want to add that on pace, I think I had, what was it? RBIs, stolen bases, and walks. And it was on pace for over 120 walks and over 120 RBIs and 30 stolen bases. There's 2 other players in Major League history that have ever done that. Jeff Bagwell did it twice, and Barry Bonds. So if Perdomo keeps up this pace, that's the company that he's going to be joining.
Seems likely.
Yeah, it's an event, man.
Yeah, whether Perdomo manages to do that or not, he has still been a really important part of this team up to this point in the season. And yes, I think the Diamondbacks are going to be better this weekend when hopefully Ketel Marte is healthy and back in the lineup and back in the 2 spot on a daily basis. But Geraldo Perdomo has done very well for himself filling in that role, and tonight was just another example of what he means to this team. Ryan Thompson, I know we mentioned him briefly earlier. Also, he deserves his flowers in this game. It wasn't the prettiest necessarily, but entering the game first and second, nobody out, you're maybe not fully expecting to be used that quickly when your closer is out there. Thompson bent, Jack, but he did not break.
That was impressive. He didn't give in. That was what was impressive to me. Like, he just did not give in. He was not going to. Well, he did leave one cookie down the middle, actually. There was an 89-mile-an-hour sinker dead center to Alvarez that I was like, whew. I thought that one was going to get locked. But other than that, I mean, he stayed around the edges for the most part. Obviously, he hit Pete Alonso, but he got out of it. And, kudos. I mean, really good job. And a much needed win.
We'll get around to Corbin Burnes' outing, some more storylines from this game on the other side of this break. But first, a few words from the guys over at Foul Territory.
For the card collectors out there, you got to check out Arena Club. I've got a showroom, AJ's got a showroom, and it's become a place where you can basically do everything digitally and physically in the hobby.
Absolutely. You can get cards. They'll grade them for you. They come in the plastic if you want to physically get them so they don't show up like this card that's all bent that Scott, for some reason, decided instead they show up nice, like the exact same card. Look how perfect this one is. That's how Arena Club sends them to you. They'll even encase them for you so they don't get messed up in transit. So Arena Club's your one-stop shop for any baseball card, football card, any card needs that you might have.
And you should check out slab packs. You can rip a pack for hundreds of dollars or less and hit on a card that's worth tens of thousands of dollars. I'll take those odds. Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or your first card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul. That's code FOUL once you get there. arenaclub.com/FOUL, code FOUL.
So Corbin Burnes tonight, Jack. He finally did it. He managed to notch his first win as a member of the Arizona Diamondbacks, and it was an interesting game for him. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if he really pitched quite as well as his final line would indicate, but 6 innings, 1 run. You'll take that every single day of the week. His final line, 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 5 walks. I looked it up, this was the first time that Corbin Burnes had walked 5 batters in a game since August of 2022. So it's been about 2.5 years since we've seen Corbin Burnes do that. But 5 walks, 3 strikeouts. And Jack, I think we are on the same page here that this was not the prototypical Corbin Burnes type outing that you really wanted to see and have been wanting to see from him for his entire tenure so far with the Diamondbacks. But credit to him at the same time that he managed to really limit the damage and ultimately was a big factor in this win for the Diamondbacks.
He got the win. I mean, he was a winning pitcher, so we're definitely going to take that. He only gave up 1 run. It was on a solo homer. We're definitely going to take that. Ironically, he had 2 strikeouts at the end of the game, both swinging strikes. I think one on a cutter, one on a sinker. I'm not sure. So, we were chatting offline before the show, kind of going back and forth about the cutter and the effectiveness and the lack of swing and miss. And it's still something that he needs to resolve. The cutter needs to be his best pitch if he's going to be dominant once again. While he's still searching for it, if this is what we have to accept, I'll more than take it. And I'm sure the Diamondbacks will too.
Going back to the cutter in particular, I think we're on the same page there. That's the money pitch for Corbin Burnes. It has been for years, and that pitch is going to have to be there at least more than it's been so far for him to really get back on track. And in that regard, tonight, Jack, this wasn't a great game for Corbin Burnes. I have a chart here of Corbin Burnes' cutter location throughout the game. There are some good cutters in there, but there's also a lot of pitches that are in the middle of the zone, and then there's a lot of just totally uncompetitive pitches. You see a number of them down below the zone, inside to lefties, as well as I'm sure outside to righties. It from a cutter command standpoint, this was not really the step forward that I think you were maybe hoping to see from Corbin Burnes. And to back that up with some numbers as well, Corbin Burnes this season, his strike rate on his cutter was just over 66% entering today, 66.3. Last year was 71.1%. So it's about 5 percentage points lower on turning cutters into strikes than he was a year ago. Today, Jack, that number was 51.8%. He threw 56 cutters in this game. Only 29 of them were strikes. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that not only is he missing his spots, but he's missing so significantly that he's not generating hardly any chase whatsoever on that pitch. Out of those 27 cutters that Corbin Burnes threw out of the zone in this game, only 2 of them actually generated a swing from a Mets hitter. So you're seeing the effects there of just a lot of uncompetitive misses. So this, Jack, in a lot of ways, it didn't do much to make me feel any better about Corbin Burnes if I'm a Diamondbacks fan. It didn't really change his status, as there are still some concerning signs here. And yet at the same time, you still have to look up at 6 innings, 1 run and appreciate that someone like him has been doing this for a long time. He sort of knows how to get outs, even when he doesn't have his best stuff, I suppose. We've seen a fair amount of that so far, and he managed to do enough to put up a pretty good final line in this game.
Yeah. By the way, Michael pointed out that it was a changeup to McNeil and slider to Alvarez that got those strikeouts. So thank you, Michael. Always Johnny on the spot with the correct information, so I appreciate that. Last time we spoke, I said my concern level was moderate, and you kind of begrudgingly agreed to say moderate, if I remember right. And so I think that's kind of where we're still at as far as moderate in terms of the long-term view of whether or not he's going to get back to being a dominating pitcher. But in the short term, he's doing what he has to do to keep the team in games. And so if he keeps doing that for a while longer until he figures it out, then everything will be fine with him. The question is, will he figure it out? I mean, the decrease in the swinging strike rate is a multi-year issue. It's not a new problem. It's not a new phenomenon. It's just a continuation of what is now very clearly a trend. So there's that.
He also continued the narrative of just continuing to go back to the cutter, kind of no matter what the results are. That's been something we've seen in a number of his outings this season. He entered today with a 53.9% usage rate on his cutter, which is about 10 percentage points higher than it was a year ago. It's roughly in line with where his cutter usage was in 2021 to 2023. Granted, it was a more effective pitch at that point in his career. But today, Jack, we saw that number jump up to 60%. 60% of Burnes' pitches in this game were cutters. And me being sort of an outside observer who doesn't understand the conversations that Burnes is having with Brian Kaplan and you know the dynamics of their attack plan against the Mets today, but at least as an outside observer, it feels like it might behoove Corbin Burnes to try leaning into his other pitches a little bit more often. Like, isn't that just sort of naturally what a pitcher would do when they're not commanding that primary pitch to the best of their ability? And if anything, we've seen Burnes throw the pitch more than we're used to seeing in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, 6 right-handed batters in a lineup today might have something to do with it, but you know, at the same time, he's clearly trying to find it, or maybe he didn't feel as good about his other pitches. You know, he was struggling kind of all the way around. So I'm not there to speak to him. I can't really answer this question. I'll speak to him about it next week.
There were a few instances here and there where he threw. Like I remember in the first inning, he threw a slider to Starling Marte that was just devastating. It was like, all right, that's like the peak Corbin Burnes slider. And then that changeup that you just mentioned, where he struck out, I believe it was Jeff McNeil, that was like the peak Corbin Burnes changeup, right? And so it's like, all right, well, we see these pitches every now and then. You wonder if he might start leaning into those a little bit more when the cutter command is off. I do want to circle back to the first inning just briefly, because I think that was a really important moment for Corbin Burnes in this game. His outing did not start particularly well, Jack. In the first, it was a leadoff double by Francisco Lindor. It was a 112.7 mile an hour lineout by Juan Soto, and then it was back-to-back 4-pitch walks to Pete Alonso and Mark Vientos. So a pretty disastrous start in that first inning, and yet Burnes managed to escape that inning without allowing a run. He struck out Starling Marte on that nasty slider that I just mentioned, and then he got a ground out to get out of that inning. So it looked like things might unravel early for Corbin Burnes in this game, but he just managed to pitch out of trouble when he needed to.
I think my rather reactionary text to you during the first inning was, "This is a disaster."
And it kind of looked like it was heading in that direction, to be fair. Yes.
I mean, but my note that I made at the moment, it's middle cutters to Lindor and Soto, and then it seemed like he got scared out of the strike zone. That was the note that I made to myself. And both those cutters to Lindor and Soto were right down the heart, and they got whacked. They didn't have that late movement, and then he walked two guys. So that was,
Right.
what I was seeing. But he figured it out, to his credit. So, I think that when we look at Corbin Burnes, we're going to have to just say, all right, hey, we've got this guy for the next 5.5 years, and we're probably not going to get the Cy Young version of Corbin Burnes that has a FIP in the low twos or under two or whatever it was and leads the league in strikeouts. I think that's already pretty much evident. That's not who the Diamondbacks signed. Now, to what level can he recover to? I don't know, but he's not that guy. That's what I'm seeing. I hate to make such a flat out declaration, but I mean, this is a trend. It's not a one-off.
Jeff in the chat says Burnes hasn't looked right. J Mart is missing by 5+ miles an hour. Gallon can't find the strike zone. At what point do we begin to look at Kaplan? Lots of talent underperforming at the same time. We are going to get into here in a moment talking about the rotation and in the broader picture, what we've seen now that April is coming to a close. But for right now, Jack, what are your thoughts on that? To me, it at least feels pretty early to be really evaluating a pitching coach seriously, just given that we've played a month of the season.
I think first and foremost, we don't really have great tools to evaluate pitching coaches.
Yeah.
That's very difficult to do. And so it becomes very much just a results-oriented game. Now, were the results better or worse last year? You be the judge. To me, it kind of looks similar, not much different. So, was Strom the problem last year and Kaplan a problem now? Or is it the pitchers who are pitching? Are they coachable enough? What's the message? There's just so many different factors involved here. And we only see either what we're looking at the press box or on TV. We do get to speak, to the pitchers, you and I do, as well as the pitching coach. But it's still like we're not there at every bullpen session. We're not standing next to him when he's talking to these guys and what he's speaking to them about. We're not in the video room with them as they're looking through all of this. So we can't really judge what the messages are. We're only judging on results.
Right.
And, it's just we're not equipped to make that evaluation. Nobody is. That's the bottom line.
Looking at some other top performers in this game, we've talked about Burnes' day, Ryan Thompson, him coming through big in the 9th inning, Geraldo Perdomo with 2 at-bats and 3, I guess technically 2 plate appearances, only 1 at-bat. He had 3 RBI, which were really big. The other guy I want to get to real quick, Jack, is Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who went 2 for 4 in this game with a single and a double, led to a run scoring in both instances. And maybe this is it, Jack. We've talked a number of times about how Gurriel is a very, very streaky player. I will reiterate that point to people who are, I think it's fair to wonder about the balance of playing time between him and Randall Grichuk and whatnot. Like, that's fair. But people who are thinking that this is the end for Lourdes Gurriel Jr. or wanting him off the team or whatever, like, I just can't even remotely entertain any discourse like that. This is a player last season, if I can find this note that I jotted down. This is a player last May who had a 532 OPS and walked 3 times in 98 plate appearances, which is essentially what he's done so far this season. This is a player who in July of 2023, so 2 seasons ago, had a 480 OPS, which is lower than where he's been so far in March and April. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. essentially has a month like this every single season. It just hasn't happened at the beginning of the year before, at least not in his Diamondbacks tenure. And so when you look up at the end of April and you see a 500 OPS or whatever for one of your key hitters, it's alarming, right? We haven't seen that with Lourdes in the past. He's generally started off reasonably well. So I still think it's fair to wonder, Jack, like, is there some regression here? Those questions are totally valid, but I'm certainly not sounding any alarm bells with Lourdes Gurriel Jr., And tonight, this was a step in the right direction for him with a couple of hits, and including a double in that 9th inning.
He's made some better contact lately. He's hit the ball pretty hard a number of times. It's shocking to me that he's gone, 50-something at bats now, 50-something plate appearances without a walk. That's a lot, even for him. But I'm going to back off here, Jesse, and let you take your victory lap on Lourdes and saying that you're correct. It's too early to give up on him. The only thing that I'll say that kind of mitigates it a little bit in my mind, or I should say makes me feel a little bit less patient, is that in the past, generally he got a little dinged up. He's dealing with a groin issue or a calf issue. He's walking around the clubhouse with 2 different ice packs on his legs. And that's kind of usually when, you see these types of rough patches come for him. But the season just started, and he's not, as far as I know, he doesn't have any undue bumps and bruises going on that often come up as the season goes on later. So that's kind of a little why I'm concerned. I'd sure like to see him pop out of this. I hope that this is the beginning of it for him. Surely this team could use a patented Lourdes Gurriel hot streak right now. A few other guys are cooling off, so it would be a great time for it.
We got a question earlier in the chat. I'll try to scroll through and find it, about the lineup in today's game, which was a little bizarre, right? Speaking of Lourdes, he was hitting 7th, which is not where we normally see him hitting in the lineup. It seems to me, Jack, that this had to do with the Mets pitching situation today, where they had an opener. What was your interpretation of the very weird lineup that Torey Lovullo put out today?
I think it was a combination of factors. Number one, the Mets had a opener going, a right-handed opener. So obviously they knew that the lefty Waddell was coming in later. It doesn't make sense to load up your best left-handed hitters all in that lineup, because then they're just going to have to turn around and face a lefty. The fact that the right-handed hitters didn't do anything against Waddell is neither here nor there. That was compounded by the fact that Perdomo got a day off. So you have Perdomo getting a day off, and you have this weird situation where the first inning or two you're going to face a righty, and then through innings 3 through 6 or 7 you're going to face a lefty. So he structured his lineup as if it was the lefty starting. So I'm not the order itself. Tower leading off, so what? I mean, it doesn't really bother me. Bottom line is it's the guys that's got to hit.
Yeah.
It's the hitters that have to hit. It's not, they didn't hit or not hit because the order they were in the lineup. So the only thing that we could question is, why wasn't Pavin Smith starting? Or why wasn't Alec Thomas starting? Well, Jorge Barroso, the last I looked, he had a double, scored a run, had a sac fly, and an RBI. So I don't have any complaint about him being in the lineup today. He did get Perdomo in at the right time, and the guy delivered 3 RBIs. Right? He pulled that trigger at precisely the right moment when he had the opportunity. So I'm not going to criticize that move. I mean, the guy needs a day off once in a while. I think it's only, has he had a full day off before this? Maybe one.
No.
Yeah,
Perdomo hasn't. Yeah.
So out of 30 games, he's played in all 30. So I really don't, it's almost like people are just looking for some reason or confirmation bias to, bag on Torey for this or that, but it's kind of silly at a certain point. Bottom line is guys need a day off once in a while, unless you want Perdomo to be Cal Ripken and play 162. He needed a day off. They were facing a right-handed opener and then a left-handed bulk guy, and it was an awkward situation to set the lineup. So, big deal. Sorry, I don't mean to be dismissive. It's just I got hit with this from like 3 or 4 different people, and I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And with Lourdes, it was interesting having him in the 7 hole. I think the intention there was to try to have him face Waddell, the left-handed long reliever that the Diamondbacks knew was coming out of the bullpen. But that didn't work because they did not make Brazoban throw hardly any pitches. He was able to get through 2 innings, and he wound up facing Lourdes Gurriel as his last batter. So that didn't work out, but that's less on Torey Lovullo than on the Diamondbacks hitters, who allowed a guy who was maybe only going to pitch 1 inning face 7 batters. The quality of the bats just wasn't there early in the game, and it really wasn't there throughout much of the the game, Jack. I mean, I was going to call him a young kid, but he really isn't young. He's 30 years old. Brandon Waddell threw 4 1/3 innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, 4 strikeouts. And that's after Brazoban, the opener, had already thrown 2 scoreless and didn't allow a hit. I think one question we could maybe lean into for a second is the Diamondbacks' struggles against left-handed pitching in particular, and how Waddell just totally had his way with the Diamondbacks lineup once he was in the game. And that's where you need guys like Gabby Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Gino Suarez. You need these guys to really start turning things around. This is a team that entering today against lefties had an OPS of 653, a 653 team OPS with just 4 homers, a 337 team slugging percentage. This is one of the best offenses in the league, Jack, but their numbers against lefties are actually very, very poor right now.
That's because it's all the right-hand hitters that are the ones slumping, and they get the most at-bats lefties. I mean, they're not slumping because there's left-handed pitchers on the mound. They're just slumping. And the right-handed hitters are going to get the at-bats against lefties. So it's not like a big mystery.
Right.
I was looking at the lineup, of course, today too, and it's the same thing every single day. The bottom 4 in the order, there's 1 200 batter and 3 sub 200 batters almost every single day. So at this point, I think we just got to circle back to, can Ketel Marte please hurry back? They need to lengthen that lineup, right? If you put Ketel back in leadoff or second spot, depending if it's a righty or lefty, you got Perdomo back at the bottom at 9th, all of a sudden your lineup's lengthened back out again, and a lot of things are going to look better. That's my thought on that.
There are few better things for a lineup against a left-handed pitcher than adding Ketel Marte to it. Ketel has been one of the best hitters in all of baseball against lefties going back several years. So, and we think that Ketel will probably get back in there this weekend. Guys out in New York, Steve Gilbert and Nick Pecorov said that is likely. I think Nick reported that over on Twitter the other day. Jack, this is the end of the first, I guess it's sort of the end of the first month and few days, but it's the end of April. So we're sort of treating this as an interesting ending point where we can kind of look back on what has happened with the Diamondbacks so far. And in particular, we want to look at the starting rotation. Corbin Burnes is oddly situated as the number 5 starter in the Diamondbacks rotation. So him pitching today completed the 6th turn through the rotation. And Jack, I know you put together this graphic for a story over on your website. This is where things stand right now after today's game with the Diamondbacks 5 starters. For those of you joining us on audio, I'll read these numbers out real quick. Brandon Pfaadt leads the way with a 2.78 ERA in 35 2/3 innings. Corbin Burnes is right behind him with a 3.58 ERA in 32 2/3. Then Merrill Kelly also at 32 2/3 with a 4.41 ERA. Zach Gallen at 32 1/3 innings, 5.57 ERA there. And then Eduardo Rodriguez struggled mightily in the game on Tuesday. He is also at 32 2/3 innings with a 6.06 ERA. Jack, these are not good numbers. Altogether, the Diamondbacks have a starting pitching ERA of 4.45 after 6 turns through the rotation, which I believe last we checked was good for 23rd in all of baseball, which is certainly not where you want to be.
Yeah, the 23rd ranking was as of about 20 minutes ago when we just looked that up on MLB. When I wrote the article today that I used the original form of that, I also included the ERA estimators, which was xERA from Baseball Savant, FIP, fielding independent pitching, and xFIP, expected fielding independent pitching, both available at Fangraphs. What these run estimators do is they provide a look at how the pitchers should be expected to prevent runs based on walks, strikeouts, and in the case of xERA, batted ball quality, and in the case of FIP, home runs allowed. Those metrics tend to be more predictive of ERA than ERA itself. So that's why we look at them. what I did here was I compiled an average of those 3 ERA estimators. And it's very interesting to look at. For example, Brandon Pfaudt's got a 2.78 ERA, but the average of his estimators is 4.11, which is 1.34 runs higher than his current ERA. And that's a total flip around from Brandon Pfaudt's previous history, where his ERA coming into the year was a little over 5, but his estimators were under 4. Corbin Burnes through tonight lowered his ERA to 3.58, but his average estimators actually went up because he walked 5 guys, only struck out 3 and gave up a homer. So his estimator went to 4.9. So those 2 guys, the 2 leaders on the team in ERA, have much higher estimators than their ERA itself. On the flip side, Eduardo Rodriguez and Zach Gallen both have lower estimated ERAs, 4.26 for Gallen and 3.42 for Rodriguez, which is
crazy.
0.64 runs lower for Erod. And we had talked, previously about the fact that Eduardo was getting pretty unlucky, and that certainly, continued yesterday in the game in which he gave up 3 home runs and 8 runs in total. For Zach, 5.57 ERA, certainly not what you want. The 4.26 estimated ERA is not great. I mean, that's still slightly worse than league average. So right. I think what we can say here is, look, usually when you see a guy have a very low ERA, the estimators are going to be higher. And usually when a guy has a pretty high ERA, the estimators are going to be lower, especially we're only 6 starts in. That we're 18, 20%, less than 20% of the season in. So at this point, it's still not a very large sample size, but it's still interesting to look at and starting to be somewhat meaningful to look at the differences between these estimators and the ERA and say, where does that point us going forward?
Yeah. I still feel like if you continue to run these 5 guys out there and they continue to be healthy, which has been the case so far as we know, that you're going to start to get some better results eventually. I just look at that rotation, Jack, and I know there was a lot of conversation over the offseason, like, is this the best rotation in baseball? Is this top 5? I think we're at the point where that feels a little like a pipe dream. Like that's not the conversation we're having right now. Is this rotation top 5 or top 3 in baseball? Like, we're not really having those debates. But at the same time, like, is this rotation still league average? Is it a little better than league average? Like, I still look at those names and I have a hard time believing that Zach Gallen is going to have a mid-5 the entire year if he stays healthy. Has there been regression the last year plus? Absolutely. But Zach Gallen, even this version of himself, is a much better pitcher than that. It's hard for me to believe that those results are going to continue, even if it's just regressing down to what you were just talking about it, where the average of those ERA estimators for him is in the low 4s, right? Like, even that would be a massive improvement. And granted, is Brandon Pfaadt going to have a sub-3 ERA the whole season? Maybe not, is Corbin Burnes is probably going to have to pitch a little bit better to maintain the ERA that he has moving forward. But as long as these guys stay healthy, Jack, I still think in the long run, there's a pretty good chance that this rotation ERA improves over the course of the season. At least it feels like a reasonable expectation to have at this point in the year. I think you're muted. One of us has to accidentally mute ourselves on every show. It's just part of what we do at Snakes Territory. So
sorry about that, guys. So I was watching preseason The Athletic doing their starting rotation rankings, and almost all the guys there had the D-backs 2, 3, 4, 5. Heading into the season, their overall ranking was in the top 6 from Fangraphs, from The Athletic, from CBS Sports, basically every USA Today. They all had this team, not just within the top 10, but within the top 6. However, Eno Saris gave one note of caution. He said that he could put the D-backs no higher than 10th preseason because the Stuff Plus metric, which is his own baby, that's what he designed and developed, did not look kindly upon the Diamondbacks. And as a matter of fact, starting the overall pitching Stuff Plus for both starters and relievers, it ranks 20th with a 99. If I switch that over to starting pitchers only, all of a sudden they have the 5th lowest Stuff Plus at 94 among starting pitchers. So that particular, I don't know if that absolutely correlates to future ERA. They also have a location plus, an overall pitching plus. When they add the location plus, they do a little bit better. But the point being, most of these guys are averaging 91, 2, or 3 with their fastballs. There aren't any mid to high 90 fastball guys actually in the rotation right now. Corbin Burnes' cutter isn't working so hot. We've talked a lot about Zach Gallen's fastball. Erod and Merrill, they're not out there dealing in stuff. Brandon Pfaadt probably has the best stuff amongst this group right now. But sometimes, that sweeper can get a little fat in the zone. So that's the cautionary note there, is that the stuff may not quite be up to snuff to actually justify even getting above league average.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I will add that I'm not sure that this Diamondbacks rotation, even operating at its best, would necessarily be top 5 in Stuff Plus. Like, I don't think this rotation is built that way. Merrill Kelly and Eduardo Rodriguez in particular are pitchers that have had really good seasons in the majors in the past, but they've never been lighting up, the Stuff Plus leaderboard. Like, that's just not their game. So I don't think this team needs to be elite in that sense in order to be really successful. But you're right. If you're talking 5th lowest in all of baseball, like, that's not where you want to be. And there is some legitimacy. There's totally some legitimacy to those numbers. I mean, part of that is the regression of Zach Gallen's arsenal, honestly, across the board. I think his fastball Stuff Plus is actually a little bit better this year than it was a year ago. He's getting a little bit more vertical ride on that pitch this season than he has in the past. But almost all of his other pitches, I believe, the Stuff Plus has gone down. And then Corbin Burnes, certainly, he's throwing a whole bunch of cutters, as we were talking about earlier. And the Stuff Plus on that pitch has sort of been decreasing on a year-to-year basis for a while now, and that trend has also continued. So it's a good point. It's definitely something to monitor. The last point that I'll make real quick, Jack, maybe I don't know if you have any other rotation thoughts before we wrap things up here, but Brandon Pfaadt everyone has thrown basically the same number of innings, like the exact same number of innings, either 32 1/3 or 32 2/3, except for Brandon Pfaadt, who's at 35 2/3 over 6 starts. It's basically 6 innings per game. And there's something to be said for that. Is the sub 3 ERA, is he going to be able to maintain that? I don't know. But he has shown the ability, even last year when he wasn't at his best, he is continuing to really be a workhorse for this team.
Yeah, his ability to get deeper into games, I mean, that's what he's going for right now. When we spoke to him after his last start, he was very clear. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get deeper into the games. So he's trying to pitch a contact, make them hit the ball. He's not necessarily going for the strikeout as much as he did last year. And that's working for him. And especially in the circumstances where he knew the team was at, he was especially focused on that in his last start because they needed length from him because of the issues with the bullpen and getting overtaxed. So, right. We'll see. Again, it's all small sample size stuff, right? It's small, but it's not small. When I wrote my article today, I said we're kind of in an awkward spot because 6 starts is 6 starts. It's not nothing, but it's still less than 1/5 of the season. So, we have a lot of time for things to kind of move around. I mean, every time we look back at pitchers, he had a great July, but a bad August, but then he was good again in September. I mean, it's 1 month and it just stands out to us more because it's the first month.
Yeah, totally. Ernesto in the chat said league average with lots of innings eaten is what I'm hopeful for. 4 to 5 inning games can't happen with talent. Yeah, I mean, there's a big gap between 23rd in ERA and 15th. Like if the Diamondbacks were able to get their starting pitching ERA just to the middle of the pack the rest of the way, that would be really big for this team. I mean, the Diamondbacks are about to get Ketel Marte back, and on paper, and this is where I do trust that this offense has the ability to maintain what it's done. Maybe, maybe individual guys are going to regress a little bit. Maybe they drop a little bit in the grand scheme of things with where they are ranked in runs scored and whatnot. But with Ketel Marte back in there, Jack, I don't think there's any reason that this offense can't operate near the top of the league. And if you combine that with a starting pitching staff that's just league average, you can win a lot of baseball games that way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the hope. Obviously, lately, the offense has not been firing on all cylinders. They have a good game or two, and then they have a stretch of 3 where they're not so good. It's been very inconsistent. I don't want to use the word feast or famine. It's not like the early part of last year where they scored 18 runs and 16 runs and then 2 and 3 and 2, but it hasn't been quite that extreme. But there has been some inconsistency, and obviously from after that 10-run inning till now, the team batting average is quite low. The 10-run inning they had on the 18th in that 13-11 game they lost to Chicago. From that point forward, overall, the team, they're just not getting a lot of hits. They've been getting some slug. They've been taking their walks. They're not like at the bottom of OPS, but the batting average hasn't been where you want to see it. They've been struggling with runners in scoring position and getting the big hits. They need Ketel, and they need a healthy, hitting well Ketel. He's got to come back and give a boost. Corbin's cooled off a bit over the last 6 games or so, which is natural. I think he's like 4 for 27 or 4 for 29 in his last 6 games. 3 of those hits are triples, and I'm sure that he'll turn around and get a bunch of hits coming up here pretty soon. But it's not fair. I mean, he's still got over 1,000 OPS, right? It's not fair.
I think it's slightly under. I think it's just under 1,000 now, but it's still pretty good.
Well, I mean, the point being is you can't depend on Corbin Carroll to carry you for 162 games. He's going to have moments and times where he's not getting all the hits that he was getting early on. So other guys got to step up. Be nice if some of those right-handed hitters would get a little bit more consistent and get those averages up.
If you're joining us here in the chat, we really appreciate you being here, seeing all your comments coming through. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button. It makes the YouTube algorithm gods like us all the more. And also hit the subscribe button if you have not already, so that you can be notified whenever we go live here on Snakes Territory. A couple of last things we wanted to hit before we get out of here. We don't need to dwell on this game, Jack. It sort of feels like old news given all of the craziness of today's game. But the opener of the series in New York was not particularly pretty. The Diamondbacks lost 8-3. Eduardo Rodriguez gave up all 8 runs in 4 innings of work, 9 hits allowed. Ryan Nelson came in after that and looked really good. 4 scoreless, no-hit innings. But granted, the Diamondbacks were not really in the game at that point. Pete Alonso went 2 for 3 with a homer. Francisco Lindor went 1 for 4 with a home run. Just all the way around, Jack, not a pretty sight at all on Tuesday for the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, the lead into my article about the story, the game story that I posted was it wasn't as close as it didn't feel as close as the score, and the score wasn't close.
Right. Yeah.
The bright spot there obviously was 4 scoreless, hitless innings from Ryan Nelson, and then the big debate point there is how do they get this guy back in the rotation, and who should he replace if he does come into the rotation? And barring an injury, doesn't look or feel like the Diamondbacks are very eager to make any kind of move in that regard. And I don't know what you would do, and that's another whole discussion to have. We kind of took a stab at it offline, I think, but he's not going to replace Corbin Burnes or Zach Gallen or Merrill Kelly or Brandon Pfaadt. The only one that he might replace in the rotation at some point is Eduardo Rodriguez, but Eduardo Rodriguez is a veteran pitcher on a multi-year contract, making $20 million a year, with a good track record. So they're going to be very slow to make that move. So for the time being, and I, wish the best of health and performance to all the pitchers in the Diamondbacks rotation. Ryan Nelson's going to have to continue as a long reliever.
And Eduardo Rodriguez, despite that ERA that now starts with a 6, the average of his ERA estimators is 3.42. So do with that what you will. Not a pretty sight in any sense of the word on Tuesday, but the Diamondbacks do have an opportunity to win this series on Thursday in the rubber match with Zach Gallen on the mound on their side of things, going against Kodai Senga for the New York Mets. On paper, a pretty darn good pitching matchup. Before we get out of here, we did want to touch on AJ Puk, the news there. Jack, it sounds like AJ Puk is going to avoid surgery. This came out after, I believe, the Tuesday game in New York with both Nick Pecoro and Steve Gilbert out there in New York reporting. It sounds like Puk is going to avoid surgery. The Diamondbacks are going to shut him down and then reevaluate him in 2 to 3 weeks. And then he theoretically would start a throwing program once he is asymptomatic. Still not great news here, Jack. It's still kind of hard to say when you could realistically hope to see AJ Puk in a game again, but certainly seems to have avoided the worst case scenario.
Very happy for him that it's a flexor tendon strain and it's not something that he doesn't have a tear of his UCL and need to go get Tommy John surgery, which we all thought was going to be the worst case. When you start hearing second, third opinions, multiple opinions, and as long as it was taking, I'm pleasantly surprised by this news. And so going forward, the last time he pitched was the 17th. So it's already been 13 days since he last pitched. And they're saying he'll be reevaluated after 2 to 3 more weeks. So that's 14 to 21 more days. So right. By the absolute earliest that basically he's going to start throwing is going to be close to 4 weeks or 5 weeks from the time of his initial injury. And then from there, how long is it going to take for him to work through a throwing program? The way they usually do these things is he plays catch on flat ground, 60 feet, then 90 feet. How many times have you guys heard or read the updates? Oh, so-and-so's throwing from 60, then 90, then 120 feet. They get out to 120, then they get up on a bullpen mound. They throw a couple of bullpens, then they face live hitters. Then they face live hitters again. Then they go out on a rehab assignment. All of that's going to take probably another 3 weeks. So I would be pretty surprised if we saw AJ Puk on a major league mound inside of 6 weeks from now. Very unofficial timeline. But again, that's just speaking from experience and piecing together what they've told us and together with what they've done in the past. If you shut a guy down for almost a month, then you can't just turn around and ramp him up within 2 weeks. It doesn't work that way.
Right. And it will be a little bit easier for AJ Puk given that he is a reliever. I'm thinking you walking through all of those steps makes me think of Eduardo Rodriguez last year and feels like we were playing that game for the entire summer, right? All right, Erod's at 60 feet. Now he's at 90 feet. Now he's at 120, For AJ Puk, theoretically, it should be a faster process. He's a reliever. He doesn't need to get built up to, 5 innings, 75 pitches or whatever. We'll certainly keep you all updated on the AJ Puk situation as time goes along. But right now, certainly decent news coming out of the Diamondbacks on that front. Sounds like there's a pretty good chance that he could pitch for this team later this season. Getting to some comments in the chat here, Jack, there was some talk from Fleaball27 was suggesting that Torrey's platooning game probably needs to stop. Corbin Burnes echoed that and seemed to agree with that. I don't know if I'm quite in that camp, Jack. I think that Torrey, in no way am I saying that every decision Torrey Lovullo makes has been perfect. I think there's a number that we could criticize and have criticized already throughout the season, but the platoon game doesn't seem to be anything crazy to me. I mean, it's basically Alek Thomas starts against righties, Jorge Barrosa starts in center field against lefties, Randall Grichuk starts at DH against lefties, and Pavin Smith starts at DH against righties. Those are really the only platoons that Torrey Lovullo has in place right now, and having 2 platoons is pretty normal.
Well, I think there's a secret agenda here. I think all the people that want to see Torrey fired basically want to see him stop going by the directives of the front office, who puts together the roster and tells him Randall Grichuk is going to play against left-hand pitching and Pavin Smith is going to play against right-hand pitching and so forth. That's done by the front office. They piece together the roster. They tell the manager, these are the roles that we want them to play. So if you want Torre to get fired, then advocate for him to not go by the program that's been laid out by the front office when it comes to utilization of these players, and he'll get fired pretty quick.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Elise, I appreciate your shout out in the chat. Good to have you here as well. Yeah, we can't go live 5 days a week, unfortunately, over here, but we're able to do one of these post games every week. It's a good time. That is everything that we have for what wound up being another extended edition of Snakes Territory. Jack, we're just after we did a mailbag for over an hour, now I think an hour is just sort of becoming the norm inadvertently. Maybe we'll go back to 30 minutes, which was kind of the original idea at some point. But hey, many of you are still here, so we appreciate you sticking along with us here along the way. If you haven't already, once again, be sure to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Hit the like button, leave a comment, whether you're here live in the chat. We appreciate all of you who have done that throughout the show, or if you're watching after the fact, we love to interact with you that way as well. Jack does a great job covering the Diamondbacks over at Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. You can find his stuff at si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks. And of course, you can find us over on social media. I am at Jesse N. Friedman on X. Jack is at ShoeWizard59, and our show is at Snakes Territory. Jack, any other final thoughts here before we say goodbye?
Just want to thank everybody for tuning in and hitting us with a bunch of great comments. I know that sometimes I don't always entertain every question in the way you're expecting to hear it, but I sure appreciate everyone asking the questions. And, I promise you this, I'm always going to give it to you straight, what I think and what I feel. I'm not going to be right about everything.
We'll see about that, Jack. Sometimes, you go on a nice little run for a while. So, well, thank you again to all of you for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be back with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.